and welcome. I'm Leanne Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Al Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Israel is suspending 37 aid groups in Gaza and the West Bank, sparking international concern over worsening humanitarian conditions. Passengers are warned of more delays and last-minute cancellations as Eurostar services resume. And from tariffs to ceasefires, we break down Donald Trump's busy first year of his second term. Now, Israel will revoke the licenses of 37 aid groups in Gaza and the West Bank, including Action Aid and the Norwegian Refugee Council, for not meeting new registration rules. The move, which comes into effect tomorrow, has been criticised by foreign ministers from 10 different countries who say it could actually make the humanitarian crisis worse. Israel says aid will still reach people through approved UN and partner channels. For more on this, I'm joined by Dr. Mahema Abou-Sada, Associate Professor of Political Science at the Al-Azhar University in Gaza. Doctor, thank you so much for joining me. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. I just want to start with asking, why is Israel revoking permits from humanitarian groups in Gaza?
Well, many thanks, Leanne, for having me. It's always a pleasure to be with you. It seems to me that the Israeli justification for suspending the licenses of 37 international non-governmental organizations isn't really what Israel is saying, that they are not abiding by the rules of the Israeli registrations. I think Israel is determined to make the daily life of the more than 2 million Palestinians as tough, as even much worse than it is right now. We all know that those 37 international organizations are delivering food, relief, aid, and they are also providing medical services to the more than 2 million Palestinians who have lived through the worst catastrophe in the 21st century. And I think Israel is just basically trying to make it much worse for the Palestinians to leave. And I think it's not a coincidence when the U.S. President Donald Trump said 2 days ago when he met with Prime Minister Netanyahu that according to Israeli public opinion polls, probably more than half of the Palestinians would leave if they were given the chance to leave the Gaza Strip. And that's what Israel, I think, is trying to do, to make it much harder, much tougher for the Palestinians to stay in Gaza and basically push them to leave the territory voluntarily, as Israel is basically saying. And at the end of the day, the daily life conditions now are as bad as it is. And by suspending the work of those 37 international non-governmental organizations, I'm very much sure that it's going to make it much worse, especially for the needy, for women, children, handicapped Palestinians, poor families. We all know that 90% of the 2 million Palestinians are living in tents in those inhumane winter conditions right now.
And Doctor, Israel says aid agencies were told about the new requirements and changes all the way back in March. And Israel says they have been given nearly 10 months to comply with these new regulations put in place. So the big question is, why haven't humanitarian groups done this?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, these international agencies who are operating in the Gaza Strip and West Bank basically said that delivering complete information about their staff in the Gaza Strip and West Bank will put their work at risk. That's what their response to the Israeli new registration requirements. And we all have to take into consideration that the situation in Gaza is very grave after 2 years of Israeli war against Gaza and continued Hamas presence. in Gaza. The security situation is very much putting many of those organizations at risk, and that's why I think they do not want to deliver the full names and details of all of their staff in the Gaza Strip. But I think that it's not going to be hard for Israel to basically know who is working for these international organizations. Israel, who is in control of more than half of the Gaza Strip right now, according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, who said more than 2 months ago that Israel is still in control of 53% of the Gaza's territory. Israel, with its intelligence services in the ground, is able to know who is working for these international organizations. I don't really buy that this is the reason why Israel is doing that. It's very obvious to me that the Israeli decision is a political decision to deprive the Palestinians who are in need of this service of sustaining their daily life. It's a measure that is dedicated to basically make the Palestinians leave the Gaza Strip. But also, the decision, by the way, doesn't have to do with the Palestinians in Gaza. It also includes the work of these international organizations also in the West Bank. It's also part of the Palestinian policy right now is to try to sustain their daily life, to try to keep their resilience in the occupied Palestinian territory. But we are always amused by how Israel comes out with new policies and new registrations and new rules to try to make it harder for the Palestinians to stay on their land and to keep their resilience, as they have been trying to do for the past more than 55 years, since Israel occupied West Bank, Gaza, and East Jerusalem in 1967.
But you know, Doctor, you just mentioned Hamas to me there, and we've also been speaking about the West Bank and the Middle East and that area right now, and how difficult things are for people, and how Israel is now revoking those licenses of 37 humanitarian groups. But my big question to you is, what is the international community doing? We can all see that this is happening. Many countries came out and said they would recognize a Palestinian state. But listening to you speak and seeing those pictures of horrendous winter weather in Gaza, what is the international community actually going to do to help those people?
Well, Layan, that is definitely a very good question. And unfortunately, it seems to me that the international community isn't able to help a lot with what the Palestinian people are facing or they are suffering. Yes, what we have today is that 10 European and non-European countries condemned the Israeli decision to suspend the licenses of those 37 international non-governmental organizations. But in the meantime, the international community, in my opinion, has failed so far to put any measures, whether it's economic measures, commercial measures, or diplomatic measures on Israel to stop its violation of international law and international humanitarian law. Yes, I agree with you that I think it's now about 159 countries who have recognized the Palestinian state on the 1967 borders, but Israeli policies day after day are making it impossible for the creation of a Palestinian state. And the Israeli current government and radical elements within this government, like Minister Smotrich and Minister Ben-Gvir, are saying it publicly that they are not going to allow the establishment of a Palestinian state. They are going to make it impossible for the Palestinians to have a contiguous Palestinian state in the West Bank. Again, it all depends on the power of the United States government. It all depends on the power of President Donald Trump, who would probably and is capable of basically putting enough pressure on Netanyahu to implement his plan, which he revealed about 3 months ago, that at the end of the day will allow the Palestinians for self-determination and Palestinian statehood. Those are items number 18 and 19 of Trump plan, but it's very obvious that Netanyahu made a veto over those items, and he made it clear that a Palestinian state, as he say it, is a danger or a strategic danger for Israel. Now, again...
But Doctor, sorry, sorry to cut in there, just because we're running out of time slightly, but I just wanted to ask you another quick question, if I can. What about Hamas? Because Hamas are said to be gaining power in Gaza right now, and the US, of course, and Israel want them to disarm. They have refused to do that. What is Hamas doing?
It's obvious that Hamas, since the ceasefire has come into effect on October 10th of this year, almost 3 months ago, Hamas has strengthened its presence in the Gaza Strip. It has regained control of the streets of Gaza over the past 3 months. And I think the delay by Israel and Netanyahu to move to the second phase of the Trump plan is basically allowing Hamas to strengthen its presence in the Gaza Strip. I think if Israel were to move from phase 1 to phase 2 and allow the establishment of the Palestinian Technical Committee that will somehow deal with the Hamas political and security presence in Gaza. Again, it seems to me that we are going to see some aspects of that Palestinian Technical Committee presence in Gaza on January 15, as President Trump has stated 2 days ago that on January 15 we will see the deployment of ISF and also the establishment of the Palestinian Technical Committee, which will take the powers from the hands of Hamas to some extent.
Dr. Makhaima Abu Sada, yes, we'll watch to see what happens next year in regards to this ceasefire that was brokered by the US. Thank you so much for your time.
It's always a pleasure.
Now, Eurostar trains through the Channel Tunnel are running again after major disruption during the busy New Year travel period. A power fault and a broken down train caused long delays for thousands of passengers. Services restarted just a few hours ago, but Eurostar is warning there could still be delays or cancellations. For more on this, I'm joined from London by journalist and broadcaster Juliette Foster. Juliette, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. So the good news, I guess, is that Eurostar services have resumed and the Channel Tunnel is now indeed open. But are things running smoothly again for all those passengers wishing to get away?
Well, let's put it this way. If you were planning to leave London to go to Paris just after 6 o'clock this morning, your train would have been cancelled. So you'll hope that you would have actually picked up a later train to get you there so that at least you can get settled in, you can have some lunch and prepare yourself for the evening celebrations in Paris. But look, the reality is that people's arrangements, they have been disrupted. And this whole business started, in fact, yesterday afternoon. This is when it all kicked off. And yes, in fairness to the company, they did have a backup plan in action, and it did appear to work for a bit, and then it broke down. And then you had all of these build-ups developing along the system. In fact, I was reading about reports that you had trains stuck in tunnels and some of them actually getting out of London and going so far into the journey and then having to go back to where they started. Again, a huge problem for some of the travellers because they thought, well, OK, do we hang around and see if we can find somewhere to stay and then perhaps get on a train the following day, or do we just give up? The other interesting thing about this is that, yes, it has been very disruptive, but there is that saying, one man's meat is another man's poison. So if you happen to be one of the aviation companies, if you happen to be on the cut price carriers like EasyJet or Ryanair, then yes, there is the opportunity to pick up that additional passenger slack. The problem, though, is that they have they themselves only have a certain amount of capacity to take this. And of course, the difficulty when something like this arises is that fares do go up. And in fact, I checked the Eurostar site, in fact, for these journeys from London to Paris. And I actually found that on one of the later trains, the fare was over £300. I read somewhere else, in fact, on one of the other reports from a transport reporter writing in about this, that the cheapest flight which they found on one of the national carriers here, leaving London to fly to Paris, was about £600. So this really has been disruptive in more ways than one, because yes, some people have found that they're perhaps getting to Paris or Amsterdam a little bit later than what they intended. So yes, they will get some of their New Year celebrations, but it's also the inconvenience as well. You don't want to travel in a way that's hurried and where you can't really settle into the journey and then just relax for the rest of the day. It's the worry. Am I going to get on that next train? Will I get a seat? How much extra is it going to cost me? So yes, services are moving. When will they get back to normal? Well, that could be, who knows, perhaps over the end of the day, perhaps over the weekend when things really do settle back down. But again, it is a bit embarrassing and very exasperating if you're one of those travellers who was caught in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's that not knowing what's going to come next. And of course, you know, we can't forget that this is one of the busiest travel weeks of the year. Passengers were stranded on Eurostar trains overnight, as you did say, in all different places, on the tracks, in the tunnels. It was very difficult for people to get from place to place. What caused this widespread disruption? Do we have any more details on what went so wrong?
Well, what we heard was that there was an incident, a power outage. And again, the question is, well, how did it happen? I am not going to be conspiratorial about this, but I mean, I do have a thing about transport in the sense that when something goes wrong, obviously we want to know why, but you can't just settle for, something went down here on the cables, whatever, and we've restored it. Yes, the engineers did come out all night and they'll put in some good claims for overtime, let me tell you that, given the time of year as well. But there clearly was some sort of a power outage. The question is, what happened? What caused it? Okay, how can we prevent it from occurring in the future? Okay, now in fairness to Eurostar, it did have a backup plan to lean into. It did lean into it, and it worked up to a point. It also involved the shuttle end of things. Okay, so this is the line which carries the cars and the trains, the freight, basically, the cars and the freight. And then there was a breakdown there, so then you had a backup for the cars wanting to get into Calais, being stranded at Folkestone, and so on and so forth. So clearly, the trigger to all of this does appear to have been that power outage. Now, they will need to work out why. Why did it happen? Who is going to take responsibility for that? Because Eurotunnel, as I understand it, they said, hang on a minute, that's not our fault. But I think people get very, very sensitive when things like this happen, when you attribute it to a failure somewhere, a mechanical failure somewhere in the system. Is it just simply that there was too much capacity and it couldn't perhaps cope and it took things beyond their normal limits? Or some people might turn around and say, well, maybe there's some sort of sabotage that was going on. I'm not suggesting that for the moment. What I am saying is that when a transport system works reasonably well, okay, and it copes at times when it is tested, like now, the Christmas New Year break, and something goes wrong, okay, you have to think about all sorts of possibilities, okay, and you have to ask yourself, well, was there some malicious intent on this, simply to test the system to see what damage we could inflict? Now, it's not as far-fetched as it sounds, because we have had episodes in other parts of Europe, for example, also in the UK, where transport systems have been attacked. So you have to think about this, okay? So once upon a time, when the world perhaps wasn't in the place where it is now, you could just simply take an explanation at face value. That's not quite the case. But either which way, it has certainly disrupted systems. They need to find out what happened, okay, so that it doesn't repeat itself, because we know that there are certain times in the year when the usage will be very heavy. Christmas is one. If you have long bank holiday weekends, that's another. Also Easter, okay? So people will want to go away. So you have to make sure this doesn't happen, because the good thing, the merciful thing, is that it doesn't happen all the time. But when it does occur, it leaves a very sour taste in the mouth of the users. And they're not going to be happy, because remember, the Eurostar fares, they've gone up. Your average traveller who uses it, he or she is a captive audience. Why? Because there isn't a rival to it, okay? If you're going to use an alternative, you get the plane. But if you don't want to use the plane and you'd like to travel to Paris or to Amsterdam or to Brussels by train, okay, what rival is there to the Eurostar? There isn't one, not really.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Juliette Foster, I've gone on the Eurostar many times. I am telling you, there's no rival to it unless you get on a plane. But thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Happy New Year's to you.
And a Happy New Year to you too. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Let's take a look at some of the other stories making the headlines today. The granddaughter of former US President John F. Kennedy has died at the age of 35. Tatiana Skolsberg, a climate journalist, announced in November that she had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer and had been given a year to live. Now, thieves in Germany have carried out a major bank heist, drilling into a vault and stealing an estimated $35 million. Cash and other valuables were taken, with more than 3,000 safe deposit boxes containing money, gold and jewellery broken into. The suspects do remain at large. The former Bangladeshi Prime Minister Khaleda Zia will receive a state funeral expected to draw thousands. Zia was the first female leader of the South Asian nation. The country is observing 3 days of mourning. Now, throughout the last year, we have been reporting on what has been a very, very busy year for US President Donald Trump, marked by major moves, both, of course, at home and abroad, from rolling out new tariffs and deploying the National Guard to tense domestic situations, to helping broker a ceasefire in Gaza. His first year in office has been anything but quiet. For more on this, I'm joined from Washington, D.C. by Republican strategist Adolfo Franco. Adolfo, as I said there, it's been a busy year. President Donald Trump is closing a seismic year as the country's commander-in-chief. What do you think has been the biggest political win since re-entering the White House for the president?
Well, thank you for having me. He is a transformative president, and it has been a remarkable record. Let me first address domestic issues. The president promised to close the border. He did. The president promised to lower illegal immigration. It is at historic lows. Never have we had such low levels of illegal immigration. He promised to bring down crime. He has done so as well at the federal level and deployed, as you mentioned, National Guards, for example, in Washington, D.C., which has been, again, remarkable. He passed what we call the Big Beautiful Bill, which extended his tax cuts of 2017. He has eliminated tax on overtime and tips for millions of Americans. He's brought inflation down in this country to 2.7% from the highs of 9% under President Biden. He has also done more to deregulate and stimulate the economy than we've had in years. We've had tariffs, as you mentioned in your headlines here, that people have said were doomsdays in April. The stock market in our country is at record levels. So domestically, it has been remarkable transformation. And I think more will come next year. On the international front, as you mentioned, we had absolutely no prospects of a ceasefire or peace in the Middle East, in Gaza. It's a difficult process, but it's a process that we have never seen in the past, and certainly not in the past administration. He's brokering a deal, apparently, with Ukraine, or at least there are serious considerations and proposals on the table, which we didn't have previously. And of course, he's brokered, as you mentioned, the India region, the subcontinent, not with Bangladesh, but Pakistan and India, a peace deal there. The Pakistani prime minister nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, done something in Africa. So the engagement, energy level, and transformation of our country in 1 year, and the mood in this country is completely different than it was just 2 or 3 years ago.
So lots of wins that you outlined there for me on the domestic and the international level, Adolfo, but it hasn't always gone Trump's way. Let's be honest. He's been plagued by the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files, which he's appeared in, and the Russia-Ukraine war, despite his attempts to broker a deal, like you said, just hasn't come to fruition. How have these setbacks been viewed by Donald Trump's MAGA base?
Well, first, obviously, there are always going to be issues. They're not all going to be resolved in 1 year. And in terms of the human nature of issues or other challenges, not everything is going to be resolved necessarily. With Epstein, of course, we have not seen any evidence to date that the president is implicated in anything that's criminal or similar to, for example, what had happened to Prince Andrew or some of the outrageous allegations. Keep in mind that the Epstein files were in the hands of the Democrat administration under Joe Biden and reviewed for many years by his adversaries. And had there been significant evidence or dirt or anything of that kind, or less than that, that would have been exposed. With respect to Ukraine and Russia, yes, it is a difficult process. But where were we 3 or 4 years ago? He has been praised by European leaders and others about his efforts in that regard. I think, and I'm hopeful there will be an agreement, but the progress and engagement has been something that has just pales in comparison to the previous administration. Keep in mind that President Trump's great success internationally has to do with something that our adversaries and our friends both know, and that is his unpredictability. And that is, I think, something he uses to his advantage. No one really knows, as he himself has said, I might do it or might not do it. What I mean by that is that everyone has to take him seriously because it is the United States of America. There's now even suggestions, I don't think it will happen, that we would deploy U.S. troops to Ukraine. So you go from non-engagement to U.S. troops. That puts pressure on parties to come to the negotiation table. And that, of course, has been the art of the deal and his success politically and in terms of the business world.
It's really interesting because I think his foreign policy has had some European leaders hopping, Adolfo. Let's be honest, they've been pretty concerned about a lot of things that have been happening. But I want to move on and look a little bit ahead. Trump has never failed to entertain us, has he? From his dancing on stage when it comes to YMCA. I mean, he's always almost got a great sense of humor. We can't forget that about Donald Trump. And like you said, he surprises all of us. But what do you think could define the next year coming up for President Donald Trump, 2026? We do know there's midterm elections. There's a lot to look forward to. So what, if you had your crystal ball, what do you think?
Well, Mike, you're right about the entertainment factor. We need to keep in mind most American politicians are that. They have been career politicians, statesmen. I'm not taking away from that. I've worked for them. I've worked on Capitol Hill. I've worked in administration. But President Trump is, at heart, an entertainer, a showman. He had television programs and so forth. And I do think that works to his advantage. President Reagan, who was an actor, once said that people criticized him by saying, I can't believe an actor is president. And his response was, I can't believe one is not in show business and not president. So I think that is a talent and works, again, very well. Keep in mind that President Zelensky was also an entertainer. However, back to your question about the next year, I think the domestic agenda will be in the forefront because of the midterms that you referenced. The big, beautiful bill and its impact will start to be felt by the American people in terms of lower taxes when they fill out their taxes in April of this coming year. So I think the domestic agenda and lowering prices, which is the term now being used by the Democrats and embraced by Republicans, affordability is going to be key. With gas prices and energy prices down, I think people will start to feel that. But I think the president's focus, you mentioned the MAGA base and so forth, will turn a little more inward. But we can't ignore the world either because we are the superpower, and not only in the theaters we talked about, whether they be Ukraine or Gaza, but globally. But his domestic agenda will be the priority in 2026.
And just before I let you go, Mamdani, we spoke about him. Obviously, he's going to be inaugurated tonight as New York's new mayor. There was a lot of controversy around Mamdani. What do you think is in store for New York as he is now coming into the leadership role in the city? And how do you think he'll work with Donald Trump and the Republicans? Because, of course, Donald Trump has been calling him a socialist.
Well, I think there's a lot of nervousness in New York. I just returned. I was in New York this week. I think there's a lot of nervousness. There's serious contemplation by major Wall Street firms to leave New York. The truth is an expression in the pudding. We'll see what actually happens. Many of his promises would require action by the state government in Albany, and that's going to be difficult because the makeup of the rest of the state is quite different politically than New York. So some of those promises he's made are going to be difficult. I think the chief concerns are local taxes and in the city and crime and police enforcement, what he will do. I think the president handled it magnificently with him, politically speaking, but I don't see this being a political marriage of any kind or any kind of accommodation. I think the relationship with the president will be difficult and rocky because of his policies, if they do come to fruition or they're advanced in any shape, way, or form, are going to be completely opposite of those of conservatives and Republicans. So I see the future of New York to be quite bleak. New York has been bleeding, people leaving the city for a long period of time because of high taxes, high crime. And I think, and there is a fear that this will only be exacerbated under this Mamdani administration. He has promised higher taxes. So I don't understand how business can be cheering that or welcoming that in terms of additional investments in the city.
Adolfo Franco, as I always say, 24 hours is a long time in politics. So thank you so much for giving me the roundup of Donald Trump's year in power and also what 2026 could hold. Happy New Year to you and all the best for next year. Pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks, Adolfo. Let's take a look at the top business news now. A UK company has launched a mini factory in space. Space Forge aims to manufacture semiconductors in the microwave-sized facility. Operating in a weightless environment could produce a purer and more orderly semiconductors. Now, gold and silver are set for their biggest gain since 1979. Gold prices have jumped more than 60% this year, reaching a record high of around $4,550 a troy ounce. The surge comes amid interest rate cuts, central bank buying, and a strong demand for safe haven assets. Turning to all the sports news now, and former Australian cricketer Damien Martyn is in an induced coma after being diagnosed with meningitis. The 54-year-old fell sick last week and is currently receiving treatment in a Queensland hospital. Martyn represented Australia in 4 Ashes series and won 2 World Cups. And finally, an underwater game of chess. The Diving Chess World Championships were held in the Netherlands, where players used weighted pieces on magnetic boards and had to make each move in a single breath. Former Dutch champion Zion Collin claimed the men's title, while 17-year-old Josephine Damon was crowned the women's champion. Look at that. Thailand has released 18 Cambodian soldiers captured in July during border clashes between the two countries as part of a ceasefire deal reached on Saturday. Cambodia's defense ministry says it hopes the move will help build mutual trust and also confidence. Fighting between the Southeast Asian neighbours in December left dozens dead and displaced more than 1 million people. Patrick Falk has this report.
Well, this is an important step towards a ceasefire deal that might hold between Thailand and Cambodia. Cambodia confirmed that 18 soldiers arrived back in the country on Wednesday morning. Crowds of people cheered as they welcomed them home along a road leading to an international checkpoint. The agreement to release the soldiers was actually part of a peace pact signed in October, a deal that was brokered, as we know, by the US, Malaysia and China. Thailand at the time agreed to promptly release the soldiers, but then suspended the agreement the following month after Thai soldiers were wounded by landmines while on patrol at the border. Thailand's foreign ministry said today that this has been done now as a demonstration of goodwill and confidence building, but it didn't come easy. The handover was delayed because of concerns about ceasefire violations. Reports say it finally came about following sustained diplomatic pressure from China to ensure the deal holds. But it's difficult to say just how long this will last. The latest agreement says both sides will freeze the front lines where they are now, ban reinforcements and allow people living in the border areas to return as soon as they can. But this has become a highly sensitive issue, and any minor infringement has the potential to erupt into further confrontation. And the two sides still need to resolve the demarcation of their disputed border. Patrick Falk, Al Arabiya, English.
Now, as New Year's Eve celebrations kick off around the world, authorities are ramping up security amid heightened threats. In the US, major cities are increasing police and National Guard presence, while events in Australia, Europe and Asia are adjusting or scaling back to keep revelers safe. For more on this, I'm joined from Times Square by former NYPD lieutenant and criminal justice expert, Darrin Porcher. Darrin, brilliant to have you on. So you're in Times Square, you're in the middle of all the action, preparing to ring in 2026. How safe is New York City, and what measures have authorities been putting in place to make sure everything goes without a hitch?
Well, this is the safest we've been in a long time. We have a somewhat of a unique bifurcation from a security matrix perspective, whereas we not only have individuals that are entering through the lens of magnetometers, but in addition to that, we have police officers that are scanning internally inside of these pedestrian pens in Times Square. In addition to that, we're marrying technology into the quote-unquote boots on the ground as it relates to drones that will be flying overhead. So we have that marriage of both a standing presence as well as technological innovations to assist to ensure the over 1.1 million people that have come to the city of New York as revelers are safe.
And it's really interesting because you talked to me about marrying technology there. How safe is it now that we've got technology when it comes to these big events for tracking people and just watching people? Because I always find this fascinating because I almost feel like there's so much CCTV and technology around. But Darrin, we don't even seem to notice it.
I want to say the average person in a city like New York is photographed 100 to 200 times a day. Times that by 10 on a day like New Year's Eve in an area like Times Square. What the technology does is it avails us as security personnel to look into the lens of a much broader area as opposed to what an officer on foot would do. So we're looking from a macro perspective and not a micro perspective when we speak to the technology. And it has been supported by successful conclusions on a global stage because we have more and more police departments and security agencies that are infusing technology into their mechanism of security as opposed to the quote unquote boots on the ground security.
Absolutely fascinating. I just want to move to Paris, actually, Darrin, and that has cancelled its Champs-Élysées New Year concert. What factors are driving these decisions in big European cities like Paris?
Well, there would be a threat assessment that would be conducted by police, and the French authorities, from the perspective of policing, are very brilliant as it relates to keeping their society safe. So if there was a threat assessment that deemed that there was a credible threat that had the propensity for creating an element of danger to the revelers that would have been in attendance, it makes all the sense in the world to cancel the festivities as opposed to introduce them with the possibility of people being hurt. So we look back to instances such as what happened at the Bataclan. There were credible threats that went unanswered, which subsequently led to people dying. Now the French authorities are ramping up their security fortifications to ensure people are safe. But I genuinely believe that there was something that raised the threat assessment that led the French authorities to believe that it wouldn't be the most appropriate thing to do.
And of course, let's talk about Sydney. Sydney in Australia has just welcomed the new year. And, you know, we've seen so much sadness in Australia after that deadly attack on Bondi Beach. Just how tight will security measures be there?
Well, they've since already had their New Year's Eve festivities, but the Bondi Beach tragedy acted as a teachable moment to law enforcement to ramp up the fortifications to ensure the safety of the population that would be in attendance. So I think that they used the Bondi Beach incident as a launch point for ensuring that they had the necessary provisions to ensure that people are safe.
And Darrin, before I let you go, New Year's Eve is, of course, one of the most celebrated nights all around the world where people want to go out, they want to celebrate. So what advice do you have to all the party goers watching right now about how they can stay safe?
Pay attention to your surroundings. It's not just you, but look 2 to 3 people ahead of you to see if there's something that's out of order. And if you see something that's out of order, immediately inform someone. We have a saying, see something, say something, meaning alert law enforcement as well as other individuals in that close proximity, because one voice is not as strong as 6 voices. We have large crowds of people that gather as revelers, and we want to use them in unison to alert law enforcement as opposed to just being one person that makes an observation and walks away.
Dr. Darrin Porcher, Happy New Year to you. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for your safety advice. It's been very interesting having you on the show. Now, that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X. We'll be back in a couple of hours with W News Extra. Goodbye. Happy New Year's Eve. I'll see you next year in 2026.